So we scanned 10,000 women. We made a swimsuit for each of them. And they came back to the department store and told us exactly what was right and what was wrong with that fit. We knew that the swimsuit was the most rollable garment she would ever wear in public.
I run an AI company, and so I'm morally obligated to agree with you. I have a fiduciary responsibility to my investors to also agree. With that said, I'm going to take a slightly contrarian view for just a sec. You did this thing that was absolutely impossible, and yet you did it, and you did it pre-AI. Do you think you actually could have done that any faster?
That's fascinating. I don't know.
Welcome back to another episode of the Brilliant Commerce Podcast, where I'm lucky enough to sit down with some of the brightest minds in commerce behind what I like to say are iconic or next to be iconic brands, and to tell some of their honest stories about what's working and ultimately what's not working. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Lori Coulter, co-founder and CEO of Summersalt. Lori, thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited for this.
Yeah, we were just talking about it being warm in your office. Where is your office, actually? Where am I finding you today?
So Summersalt is based in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah, always has been?
Always has been. So my co-founder, Reshma, and I are both, local, I guess, to St. Louis now at this point in our lives, and Summersalt was founded here.
Yeah, I love that story. And one of the things that you said to me that I have in my notebook here during our prep call was that you're basically a unicorn out there. As I think about like the D2C landscape and where most brands tend to be founded, they're kind of on the coast. And it's not just that the brands themselves are on the coast, their clientele tends to be sort of bi-coastal, and you're not that. So tell me how sort of St. Louis is a part of that story.
So it's interesting. I think, forever consumer marketers have known that Columbus, Ohio is kind of known as the perfect test market. And I
Yeah.
think the reason is that, if you can sell in Columbus from a scale perspective, you will likely resonate across the United States. And we're not that far from Columbus here in St. Louis, I guess you could say, both Midwestern. And we have a deep understanding of our consumer, which is kind of women aged 25 to 55, affluent, educated, likely traveling, if not in the summer, but certainly throughout the year. And just that deep understanding of what resonates with her has been part of our story, and doing it in a way that might be slightly different from our coastal counterparts, just from a overall product resonance perspective. That's really worked for the brand.
Yeah, so you found the perfect place to incubate a brand like Summersalt. We're 3 minutes in, and I haven't even asked the question, what is Summersalt?
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about the brand, and then I've got questions about your background as well.
So Summersalt is a women's lifestyle brand focused on women's swimwear and resort wear. We launched in 2017 and focused on the direct channels, so primarily D2C or e-commerce driven. Everything that we sell is our own proprietary designs. We're known for our fit. My background is I had launched a business in partnership with a major department store 15 plus years ago now, doing digital body scanning and made to order swimwear. So we scanned 10,000 women. We made a swimsuit for each of them. And they came back to the department store and told us exactly what was right and what was wrong with that fit. We then optimized our pattern library. We had over a million possible combinations of designs, literally, that really set the stage for our design library and kind of product development engine that we have at Summersalt today. So I met my now co-founder along the way. She owned an agency, was operating out of St. Louis, but supporting many of the very well-known, high-profile direct-to-consumer brands venture-backed on the East Coast at the time. In June of 2016, we met for lunch. People find it interesting. We were not personal friends and had never worked together, but we both were like-minded kind of in regards to our view on the future of e-commerce. I shared the IP I was sitting on. And she shared what she was doing. And in that conversation, which by the way was at Chipotle, not intended to be life defining, it was just kind of convenient for us both. So that tells you about
Yeah.
our personalities. And I went away from that conversation really inspired to write the initial business plan and strategy for what is now Summersalt. I think what, separates founders from everyone else is I just started pursuing what is now the concept of what is now Summersalt, developed a collection. And I went back to Reshma in December of 2016 to try to hire her agency. Ironically, she declined my business. Didn't explain why, but it turns out she was transitioning out of the agency world, looking for her permanent gig with, a consumer kind of next generation type of brand. And I happened to run into her in January of 2017, still on my way, marching towards launch. But this time we were in New York City at what was the Gramercy Park Hotel. And on the spot, she said, "I'm interested, but would you consider a co-founder?" And what's
Wow.
fascinating about that is I think we both recognized a unique opportunity to really combine our skill sets, multiply, make ourselves better separately, and then collectively, it really was 1 + 1 = 3. The rest is kind of history. We both had two businesses to unwind, fold into Somersault, etc. We were well on our path to launch, though. We opened a bank account April of 2017, and we launched May 23rd, 2017, which in retrospect is a little wild from a timeline
Yeah.
perspective.
You didn't know you couldn't do it though. Like,
We didn't
and
know
yeah.
what we found is that investors in the Midwest, where we're based, felt that was a little bit of an aggressive timeline, but, venture investors on the West Coast, it's literally a checkbox. They're looking
Yeah.
for that type of momentum and ability to execute at speed, and we did, and we came out of the gates, really in the top 1% of, consumer brands from a traction perspective. It was obvious day one. We had, press excitement, the consumer, I think our first month we sold $100,000 worth of product, which doesn't sound like a lot today, but at the time was considered a top 1% launch, and we were well on our way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's still a real amount of product to get processed through a system, to get into a warehouse, to get out of a warehouse, to get into packages, and to get ultimately to customers. I had this whole outline written based
Okay.
on what we had talked about before. And this your origin story, I don't know how I didn't ask you those questions before, but I find
Mm,
absolutely fascinating. And what a story. I did agency for nearly 20 years, and
okay.
I sort of accidentally got into D2C when one of our customers was like, "Can we just hire you?" And I was like, "Well, not really." And anyways, like, one thing led to another, and they ended up, like, yes, hiring me, and then ended up acquiring my
Yes.
agency. And it was this 1 plus 1 plus 1. In my case, I'm talking about, Glossier, and, right before I got there, Henry and Emily obviously being the founder and CEO, had just met Henry, who she hired to be COO and president, and they didn't know each other before, but their overlap was absolutely perfect, and they didn't know they were looking for each other, but it seemed like they were, and these things happen. But your story, I think, is even more interesting because I get this question all the time. Like, I've been a founder now for a really long time, since the late '90s, actually. And some people are like, I want to be a founder. And I was like, well, I don't know if it's something you just decide to do. It almost becomes this thing. You have this idea, this itch you have to scratch, and it's an addiction almost. And you better know what you're signing up for, because some days are amazing and other days are super hard. And I have been over 30 plus years of doing it. I consider myself exceptionally fortunate to have found amazing partners or co-founders along the way. And that's kind of the other advice that I give people. Like, sometimes being a founder is a really lonely place. And so let's park brand here for a sec. Maybe some advice that you might give someone else who is thinking about starting something and wanting to be a founder. What advice would you give them about the desire to do it alone, or the importance of finding a co-founder?
Well, it's interesting. So, venture investors typically see adding a co-founder as a really strong signal.
Yeah,
Um, Mainly because your ability to recruit early on is that's like your first major recruit, and the fact that you can do that, you can attract the talent really is important. So I think that is a validation point. And then two, you sort of have like duplication if something happens to one person, whatever it is, right?
redundancy.
They
Yeah,
don't
built-in
execute
redundancy.
well
Yeah,
or health or whatever. they change their mind, then you've got redundancy. So I think that's why. On the other hand, I have had investors tell me that we are the exception. Like two co-founders that are still in it, 9 years in, enjoy working together, get energy, make each other better every single day. So there are horror stories, right? So I think you just have to decide what's right for you. I have the, benefit of comparing my prior business where I did not have a co-founder to the current situation. And I can tell you it is lonely being a solo founder. And I am better because I have a co-founder, which is, I think, just, a validation point for sure. As far as advice on starting a business, I have a couple of things. One related to the co-founder situation. I don't know that you can just say today I'm a founder. I have been obsessed with entrepreneurship for a very long time. Reshma and I both had businesses we started as, you know, tweens and teens, right? And so I was writing many a business plan before Summersalt through both undergrad and graduate school and I had a few starts and stops along the way. So this isn't new. You are absolutely right. It is very hard. And I always say the highs are not as high as you think they are because they come with a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
And problems to solve. And the lows are usually not as low either. When you
Yeah.
have the hard decisions to make from a negotiating perspective, I'm not talking about internal people. I'm talking about, just like overall negotiations. A lot of times, I have learned to let other people make the hard decisions. Like don't make it easy on them.
Yeah.
Um, and
Mm.
so that's just some advice to keep in mind. And then the real, I think, exciting thing from a co-founder perspective for me that I have learned is just recognize the opportunity when it hits you over the head.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Like
don't overthink it.
the fact that Russia and I both were like-minded in our view of the brand and where it's going was great. I did not know her, personally in a professionally, but I respected her work, and I felt we were both professional enough to make it work. Whether or not we were best friends, it didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And so, I knew that her work stood for itself and that it would likely benefit the brand, and it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made.
It's one of these things for me anyways, like, there's an awful lot of emphasis on having frameworks and, like, decision-making frameworks and the way that you think. Like, I've had 4 or 5 co-founders across a number of businesses, and I don't think there's a framework for finding the right co-founder for me. Like, it's a lot of it is just, like, feel and fit. When I think about things that have worked well, it's like we weren't necessarily best friends. I didn't decide to get into business with a best friend. Like, that's a lifestyle business, and that's totally fine. But anything that you're sort of staking your career on and you're thinking about the livelihoods of others who are coming to work with you, that founder fit is really important. And as I think about the things that have worked for me, and I'd be curious if they worked for you, is that fundamentally, we had the same value system and, like, we believed the same things. And then skills, there was some overlap, but there was an awful lot of, like, "I'm gonna do this really well, and you trust me to do this. I've got this. I'm gonna trust you to do this thing, and I trust you, and you've got this, and we're gonna come together in the middle." And the thing that would always bring us back to the middle was that we had the same value system. I think no matter how talented people are, if you're gonna fall out of our values, I don't matter it doesn't matter how much money there is in the world, like, I just don't think it'll ever work. And I don't think there's enough of that advice out there, actually. I think there's a lot of, like, "Being a founder is amazing," and you're like, "Sometimes," but also other times, super effing hard. And so just be careful what you wish for, I think.
I think you're spot on, and Rashma and I's overlap is interesting in that she's a designer first with a very strong business kind of strategy mind, and I'm a business person first, analytical mind first, but I lead all product and
Yeah.
merchandising today, so I have that bent as well. And obviously there's overlap for the two of us, but I can promise you, Somersault's brand, the aesthetic, really everything that you see today has been kind of driven by that kind of mutual view of where we should be going. And we still do almost all creative in house. And
Love
that's
that.
one of the ways we are differentiated from many of our peers is we never used an external agency to do the brand. Many of the Glossier is not a good example of this, but there were many brands that were designed for men And they had agencies that were geared toward men in the D2C space. And we knew Summersalt needed to look and feel differently. I just talked about our customer being broadly across the US. If we had gone the agency route, I do not believe it would have been as resonant as it truly is.
So that's a fantastic segue, I think, to I'm going to keep flipping the script because we're on to
Yeah,
something.
let's do it.
I did want to eventually get to the difference between product and brand. And so you came to market. You had this idea for I'm not gonna. Might be a bit reductive, but a better fitting bathing suit, a better way to buy these things. You were sitting on
Yeah.
top of this insight of all these body scans, and I want to come back to the tech in a sec. But we haven't really talked about the product. We've talked about Summersalt as a brand. And I think the parallel that you're drawing or the counterpoint that you're illustrating to some of those brands that were agency led for men, I think about those more as like product arbitrage opportunities where you needed something that looked fine, but it was more about like, let's just get this product out there. I don't think a lot of those companies had the staying power, not because they didn't ship a good product, but I think maybe they missed the mark on creating a brand that had um, durability. Again, I'm going to ask you for some advice to anyone who might be listening today is how do you go from fantastic product that develops a following to really building a brand, which is the reason people keep coming back, or as I said in my sort of my cold intro here is something that people want to take with them on vacation. Like, I think that's a really wonderful place to be. So yeah, what advice would you have for folks?
So I love that you're speaking my language as far as something you take on vacation because a swimsuit in particular, you're generally buying ahead of a planned trip. You might have a small trip to the pool in your backyard in the summertime, but you've got an event that you're buying for, and that's really the deadline, right? Um, which by the way is great for brand dynamics, merchandising dynamics, and that you have a reason to buy. You typically buy at full price because you have a time-based reason to
Yeah,
purchase, which means you can't wait for the discounting, which is huge. But we started out just obsessed about product. We knew that the swimsuit was the most vulnerable garment she would ever wear in public, and we came to it with just really high empathy. I have a somewhat funny story about being on vacation when I was about 12 years old, and my mom losing her swimsuit somewhere on the Disney World, like, resort property, and it being a
oh boy,
major crisis because it was her absolute favorite swimsuit. And all that to be said, women feel vulnerable, emotional, and committed to the garments that work and fit for them. And so if you can give her that confidence, which we do with Somersault, you have so much loyalty. And the data had kind of shown that out. Brands that develop a following over time historically in the swimwear space literally held 80% of that consumer's wallet on swimwear spend going forward. So we knew that swimwear had that sticking kind of power, and we've certainly seen it in our cohorts moving forward. And you can think about it as an entry into her suitcase, per se, is how we'd say it at Somersault. And then you have permission and trust to sort of fill out
yeah.
that suitcase over time.
I love the permission word. Maybe an insight for a future product line for you. Men in their late 40s and early 50s are vulnerable about their swimsuits too.
That's good to hear. No, we see a lot of opportunity in other garment categories, and certainly, I hear requests from men frequently. So,
Yeah. I want to keep pulling on this thread about the sort of obsessing about product, but also sort of like just understanding the psychology of the vulnerability there and having that be a part of the brand as opposed to, you see an awful lot of other brands that you'd sort of like find on vacation around the pool that are much more of like lifestyle. And this is how you should look. This is how you should feel. And you're sort of like, yeah, but that's not how I feel. So what have you two sort of unlocked in terms of like, yeah, meeting customers where they are from an empathy point of view? Because it seems to really be working.
so we always say it has to be aspirational. So a little bit different. We're not a brand that's not aspirational. She has to be almost like your cooler best friend down the street, right?
Mm.
She has the inside knowledge, and she's going to help you, but she's accessible. And that's how we think about the brand. We obsess about it. A lot of people are surprised to know that I still participate in fittings for all of our garments that we're bringing out. Anything that we're producing, I'm seeing it at multiple stages of development. Everything from trend and concept, print development, etc., all the way to fittings as we're developing new silhouettes, new fabrications, etc. And then, of course, finally pre-production. And then I test all the product after the fact too. And what's fascinating about our process is that, you know, post summer, we will gather all the data on every single return that we receive. We will calibrate the feedback by style, by size, and we ask the consumer: is it too long, too short? Is it too loose? um, Too tight? Is it too much coverage, too little coverage? We're able to calibrate and see by size the feedback. And it's amazing the improvement we have in our return rates over time because of our ability to really use the data to improve the fit. Never mind the technology, like you mentioned earlier, that we had early on. We had already started from a base that the industry would just be kill to have, right?
Yeah.
So we already had an optimized fit, and we continue to optimize over time.
So as I think about that's amazing. Like the sort of the willingness to go and to look at the feedback, to incorporate it into the process, to keep getting better over time. And I would think selfishly, it improves the overall economics of the business because like returns are the one thing that sort of that hurt us in D2C. The other thing I think that hurts us is a lack of discipline when it comes to discounting. I think it's really easy to acquire customers if you're willing to give away $10 worth of product for $5. And as I was doing my research, and one of the things that you sort of clued me into is that you do take a very disciplined approach. So again, I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you for some advice. If you're running a brand and you're thinking about your acquisition and your retention strategy, how do you take a disciplined approach to discounting, but still balance it out with like hitting your growth goals? And you need new customers and you want those customers coming back.
I think the product has to be there to begin with. You
Okay.
cannot have, just product for product's sake. And we are very good from a product development engine perspective. We're fast, we can be prolific, and have been in the past. And what I've found is it's very important for me to do the pattern matching, both the data as well as my gut reactions to product that we're developing, and just be incredibly disciplined in regards to what we're actually bringing to market. Does the consumer really want this? And then we
Mm.
usually, when we test a new silhouette, we're going to test it in a few of our core solids, because we really want to get a read on the consumer's reaction to the silhouette, not to the print or, some other emotional response to something design wise. We want to know, how does this actually fit, and does she keep it, and is she buying it? And it's amazing. The day we launch, we almost know whether we've got an A, B, C, or D product almost every time. And it's a little bit discouraging for consumer founders, because if on day one you have a D product, you probably on
You've
day
got a D
100,
product. Yeah.
probably on day 1,000, and probably on day 10,000. So you just have to be willing to say goodbye
Yeah.
to
I
that
I
product.
hadn't thought about that framing in a long, long, long time. But like Glossier was very much even though we tried to get away from it, like this a launch-driven culture. And
Mhm.
we would introduce new product and we would obsess about that product. And every single time we thought our customers were gonna love it. But over time, we would start to bet on like this is gonna be an A launch and this is gonna be a B launch. And we would make corresponding investments that way. And you're absolutely right. You would know within like, I think in our case, I mean, I'm going back a number of years, but probably within a week. It was probably in the first couple of days. You're like, "Okay, we thought B,
You have
but
a
this is
good
A."
idea the
Yeah,
first few
yeah, you have a
days.
good idea. Sometimes you're gonna be surprised, but
Mhm.
I think more often than not, like the data is the data, and you only have so much influence over it. So,
But
um,
but back to your question about how to make sure you have discipline, it's just not to overbuy. And
yeah, okay,
so test and learn, and then come back with the bigger launches is really
okay,
how we do it. And we too believe in, freshness and newness, in D2C is incredibly important. It is a window dressing, I guess, of D2C. You've got to have a reason to speak to the consumer and give her something else to buy. So we are all in on that. It's just the disciplined approach and the pattern matching. Just be confident enough in your own kind of gut instincts to say, okay, this is a dud, and moving
yeah,
on.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. You can't get everything right. You can't fall in love with the idea so much that you want to be right at all costs, even though the signals are telling you like, yeah, we got this one wrong, and that's okay. Not just don't do it again and again and again. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, learn from those mistakes. I should probably try to segue us abruptly into tech. And one of the things that I wrote down in my notes was that there's a tech component to what you're doing, and maybe more so in the business that you were involved with first, but you're not doing tech for tech's sake. Like it is it's informing ultimately the product. It's leading ultimately to a better fit. And I think about this through the lens of my own business, where I'm thinking about go to market and what's going to resonate. And I can be guilty of over explaining the product and talking about like how technically sound it is. But if I'm speaking to a marketer, they're just sort of like, tell me what's in it for me. You know, what is the ultimate outcome? So I'm just curious, like, because there is technology and data going into ultimately making the product an awful lot better, do you struggle at all to balance that out, or do you really just focus on the brand building pillars? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, in a clumsy way, is the fact that you've done all of this work, is it important to building trust in your customers that the garment that they're gonna try from you maybe the first time is gonna fit better, or does that not matter?
I think it's part of our promise to the consumer and certainly the kind of validation point that she may need to convert initially. I think it's even more important for that repeat customer, though, right?
Okay.
She can trust
Ah,
us. What we're making is the same over and over again from a fit perspective. And that's how we kind of think about it. Uh, and across styles. Now she's going to have her favorite styles and certain silhouettes look better on certain people, et cetera, et cetera. And we're not perfect. However, just that consistency and the ability to say, this is my brand. I know how it looks on my body. I got a deadline and I need this swimsuit for XYZ trip. I'm going back to them. That's really what we want her
yeah,
to thinking.
yeah, and I
And then
trust it.
yeah, and then we are digitally native as a brand, right? We launched online, started online, and we hire people that have, excellent tech skills. And while we don't, develop, I guess, SaaS platforms per se, right? We're extreme users of almost all, and the tech stack is enormous, as you know, and a brand like
Yeah,
Summersalt just gets almost too unwieldy. We've sort
yeah,
of stepped back and say, okay, what's really providing value? Where can we consolidate our tech stack? Like we don't want to have so many vendors, which has been
yep.
an interesting. Like I
Now
didn't
you're
expect
speaking
that
my
to be
love
part of the
language, Lori.
journey.
Now you're speaking my love language.
Right. Yeah, right. And so we've had to identify where we want to lean in, who's really the value partners that we're wanting to be
Yeah,
with long term. And I just think it's an incredibly exciting time for brands like Somersault where we can add, efficiency with AI in almost every area of the business, operationally
yeah,
and see that those productivity gains in real time. It's like every week we see AI kind of solving a problem for us in a new way, and I don't think brands are going to look the same 6 and 12 months from now as they do
yeah.
today. We're going to all be that much better. And those brands that don't evolve are really going to have a hard time. So,
I mean, oh, I run an AI company, and so I'm morally obligated to agree with you. I have a fiduciary responsibility to my investors to also agree. With that said, I'm going to take a slightly contrarian view
oh, let's
for
hear
just
it.
a sec. For just a sec,
Okay.
let's hear me out, or humor me. Um, I was in Los Angeles yesterday, and I did a lunch and learn with about, I think there's about 25 people sitting around the table, mostly brand operators. And I'd been on this sort of like 3 week learning tour, just sort of seeing how people were using AI. Because on the one hand, like it feels magic, like, and I am getting good results personally, and I'm seeing how it's impacting the team at Court and what we're able to do in what feels faster than maybe we've achieved it before. Um, and I talked to brands and they're like, "We're not quite sure. You know, we're not getting the AOI, you're not getting the ROI out of it just yet." And so I came up with this thing where someone showed me how they were using AI, and I was like, "Okay, what I think we're seeing across the industry is like people, quote unquote, doing AI. Um, and like they're getting output, but they're not necessarily putting that output to necessarily to good use just yet." So the contrarian point of view that I want to run by you, you said, I don't remember the date, whether it was 2017 or 2018, but you did this thing that was absolutely impossible. Like, and yet you did it, and you did it pre AI. So you were going really fast back then with like with hard work and grit, and you had some amount of tech, and now you have AI. Do you think you actually could have done that any faster?
That's fascinating. I don't know. So what you said is interesting about the brand founders. If you talked to me 6 to 12 months ago, I probably would have said exactly the same thing. I believe we internally have hit a tipping point where we actually understand how to utilize the
Great.
AI. And so that's the difference. And let me give you I can give you a concrete example that is not rocket science, right? I've had a longtime executive assistant. She's essentially like a chief of staff, someone I trust implicitly, who left recently to start her own business, and we're very proud of her.
I love that.
Um,
That's the
yeah,
best
so
graduation story.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love to throw off founders, and if we don't have at least a few more, I'm going to be very disappointed. But so she's doing her own thing, but she had left me a 20-page document in regards to how she managed everything for me, and it's literally a
Like an
bible
OS. It's an operating
for an
system.
elite executive administrator, executive assistant. And so, from a training perspective, Claude can I can train Claude immediately because everything's in that single document. And now, over time, I have to continue, but that alone provided so much efficiency, just and got us up to speed that much faster. We have a brand tone kind of guide
Yeah.
already developed. In 2017, 2018, we wouldn't have had these things that
Yeah.
really allow that starting point. So I don't know. We also have,
So your team wasn't
visuals.
as big, and you held the brand voice and tone internally between the 2 of you or 3 of you, and
Correct.
so it was okay. Now the team is bigger, and I think those use cases make perfect sense to me. They also like, corroborate what I'm hearing, like, a lot of companies are using Claude, and they are trying to figure out how to leverage it more in a way that is collaborative. It does feel like there's an awful lot of digital assistants running around and people are getting utility that way. But the
Right.
governance and the coordination across organizations, like the light bulb moment for me is I sat beside this analyst and they showed me this essentially this report they'd created that made me I was like, I don't even know why I have a company if this is how they're doing it. Like this output is fantastic. And I said, can you please take me through how you did it? And he's like, absolutely. I logged into these 10 systems, downloaded these 15 CSVs, uploaded them to Claude, and then I logged into 2 other systems that I couldn't export data from. So I took screenshots. I uploaded the screenshots. I uploaded this to Claude. I prompted Claude, and it gave me this report. And I was like, this report? He's like, actually, no, the numbers were wrong. The graphs looked really good though, but
Right. The
the
visuals.
numbers are all wrong. And he's like, and he was an analyst, so he knew the numbers were wrong. And so he kept prompting it. But at first, when he asked Claude, they were like, no, these numbers are right. And he's like, are you sure? And he's like, oh, actually, no, you're right. The numbers are wrong. And I find the LLMs, as powerful as they are, they're very happy to be confidently wrong. And then you're almost like,
Right. I've had
am
that
I the
happen.
dummy? And
Yeah.
and so at the end of this conversation, I said to him, this report is beautiful. Imagine next week when you want to deliver the same thing to SLT, how do you do it? And he's like, well, I just repeat this process. And I was like, that to me is like doing AI, but not actually leveraging AI to go faster. We need to find, I think, strike the right balance between a good foundation, this 20-page manual for how we do things. Where do we get our data from? How are
Right.
we governing some of this? Because the other thing I'm hearing from brands is like, the pace seems to have increased or people feel exhausted by the pace, but I'm not seeing the output necessarily correlating with like the pace that we're feeling. The pace that you described that you were able to achieve in 2017 and 2018, it feels like there's a lot of output that people are now like, God, I've got to filter through all of this stuff that AI is generating. I believe you, by the way, that in the future, brands need to continue to transform. I don't think the transformation has happened. This is the message I'm trying to deliver. You're not behind if you haven't transformed. If
No,
you're
no,
testing and learning, you're okay. Yeah.
I think there's a tipping point where we were kind of trying to figure it out, and now we're seeing efficiency gains. But if you think about where we are in that cycle of the trend, like we're down here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
At
Yeah.
Summersalt and certainly in general. So,
I
um,
think there's a lot of honesty there, and already you've given like a lot of really honest answers. Like not the I'm just going to tell you what I think you want to hear, but like no, this is it. Like brand building is hard, finding a co-founder is hard. Here we are in the adoption curve. We're starting to see it, but we're super early on, and there's a lot of room to grow. I have one last question for you. I'm excited to hear this answer. Do you like, as you think about how you're marketing to your customer and what's resonating and, why they love the brand, um, in the future, no matter where we are on this adoption curve, how important is it for you, for your brand to resonate with virtual agents that might be shopping on behalf of their human counterparts? Otherwise, I'm trying not to say agentic commerce because I don't know how I feel about it just yet, but for a brand where like discovery and vulnerability is such a big part of it, are you thinking about that at all?
So I liken it back to sort of how discovery maybe went from, in store to just maybe it was basic search originally, and then now we're in a social kind of discovery kind of environment, right? Or a
Yeah.
lot of discovery is happening on social media. I suspect that there will be clear winners and losers in agentic commerce. Now, who they are going to be, I am not willing to take a bet yet. But there are going to be winners and losers, and I assume it's not going to be many. It's probably there is going to be a handful of clear winners that emerge that we're going to have to all adapt to. So I agree that
Yeah.
it's coming. When, I'm not sure, and in what form and who, I don't know, but we're trying to learn as much as we can as soon as we can. I'm not
Yeah.
sure it's caught, right? Like I don't know that I really want to be shop like that's the discovery piece. I'm not sure that it's not, right?
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
So,
It feels very businessy to me. Like, I
right.
love to shop. Like, I love to discover brands, and I think maybe I'll use a tool for discovery to help me whittle down the brands that I wanna go and get to know. Um Yeah, I don't know. I'm with you though. I'm with you though. But the other thing, there will be some winners, and I think what you're describing is you're not talking about brands that are going to win. You're talking about channels. Kind of like
Correct.
when you're
That's what
like
I'm
Meta and Google are channels like we're kind of just paying them a tax, but we need to be there because everyone else is there, and you're going to have to make sure that Summersalt is in whatever these winners are. And I am hearing that from like the really smart brands and operators are like, we're thinking about these as other channels. Like we want to be where our customers are, and we want to make sure that we're a part of that conversation. So. Geez, and that's probably a really good place to sort of wrap up now. I told you I was excited for this conversation, and I didn't realize how excited I was. I've done 30, 40 of these now, and the through line when I think about the connecting all of these dots about what it means to be iconic brand, it's the same thing. It's like make the right investments in tech, but don't overinvest in technology. Know your customer, but at the end of the day, just ship fantastic products that customers love. And you're not going to get it right all the time, but if you get it right more often than not, then customers are going to keep coming back. And I think just being willing to be honest and vulnerable and out there with them, I think is some fantastic advice. So, Lori, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast, for turning off your AC, and warming your way through this. This was a fantastic conversation, and I'm already looking forward to the next one.
Well, very energizing brain. Really enjoyed it. And thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome.